Poorly done on my part with the transition. Could have been smooth. Oh well. Welcome to. Let's turn. Fact. There we go. Welcome to WYCD, good lord. Welcome to WYCD Wicked, that stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake. How you doing? Can you guys hear that music? Let me know if you can hear that music. That's right. And now I just turned it off. We're looking at the Biden press conference today just because there's a chance. There's a chance. I don't think, as I've stated before, I don't think it matters as much as people are making it out to seem. Who is the Democrats' nominee for president? Is it going to be a progressive? No. So amongst the neoliberals, what do we have? Biden with the incumbency advantage. I don't even know if that's a word. The incumbent's advantage. But, a staggeringly bad debate performance. Who else could we have? Kamala Harris, most likely. And then other names have been tossed out there. Chill out. No matter which you would prefer, chill out. People's interest in this is not a bad thing. It's a sign of their interest in defeating Donald Trump. Baby. That's what we want. That is good. It's good that the Democrats care enough about beating Trump that they're willing to act a little crazy, even if you don't agree with the, strategy. But regardless, no matter how you feel about it, this is interesting. This is genuinely interesting. I'm curious to see how Biden does. And it looks like he's going to sate that curiosity shortly. Let's say hi to the Wicked community while we're here. Wicked Foxy Dragon, love your jacket. Love your jacket. Thank you, Foxy. It comes in a couple of different colors. If I want to look like a Coke dealer in Miami in the 80s, that's what I pop on. Actually, no, never mind. Let me try that again. If I want to look like I'm in a boy band in the 90s, that's what I pop on. There we go. If I want to look like an orange creamsicle, I got a color for that. If I want to look like a bellhop for Candyland, bada boom. And if I want to look like Spike Spiegel, bada boom. But yeah, we're covering this press conference today. As Foxy said, I tend to agree. This is what we're about to see is most likely an attempt by Biden to demonstrate he can still give a speech. He's still up for the job. He's got this. Don't you worry. If that is the case, what I hope he does is talk about Project 2025. He knows he's got the eyes of the world on him right now. So it would be smart of him, like with his George Stephanopoulos interview, it would be smart of him to use this to stress what a villain Donald Trump is. I would also like him to talk about how the Supreme Court has given him the powers of a king, and he has not used them. I think that is the strongest argument you can make for a Joe Biden second term. During his first term, against his wishes, he was given the immunity from prosecution that a king has. And he has said he won't use them. Thus far, he hasn't used that. There is no other human being on earth that we can say that with 100% certainty about. Just Joe Biden. That's a strong case for him. But if he talks about that, I would hope he also talks about his plan for getting rid of those powers. I would hope he talks about the necessity of a blue House and Senate to go with this lovely blue in the White House. Let this be known as the year America finally blew ourselves. Wicked Foxy Dragon says, "Did you get my message?" No. Now I'm going on to Discord. At one point, I turned off notifications on Discord, meaning to do it for a moment and only for one channel, and I turned them off everywhere. And oh, there we go. Yes. I got your message. I got your last one. And I thank you for it. And this is the game stepped up a little bit. You know, got a nice new suit. And I set something up today that I think you guys will enjoy. Tom Trask, I disagree on that he has not used those powers. That's still backward looking. He needs to give a vision of the future. Well, how do you disagree that he hasn't done something like, how do you disagree that he hasn't used the powers? You can disagree as to whether or not it's a good point, but it's a statement, or like it's a relevant point, but it's a statement of fact that he has. I mean, rather, that he has not used, he hasn't ordered anybody to be whacked, at least that we're aware of. And I do think it's looking forward. It's looking forward dealing with, I think, the most pressing concern in America right now. Because it affects everything else. It's just, by order of operations, the most important thing. Do we have a king or not? As far as looking forward goes, though, I think you're right. I think it's if you're talking about electing him, it has to be about what he will do, not what he has done. So much. What he has done is only relevant in that it informs what he is likely to do. The fact that he hasn't used them means that he is unlikely to use them in a second term. But to your point, he has to make it clear how we are going to fix this within his second term. Because no matter what, he doesn't get a third term. So we have to have this problem solved. So to that point, I hope he says we're going to pack the courts. I think that's a little brave for him, but, now's a time for bravery. I think it might behoove him to say, we need to put in a new law that says that what the I'm tempted to switch to purple. That says what the I'm just going to stick it with pink. A new law that says, or rather, not even a law, a new constitutional amendment that says, yes, the president is subject to the same laws as everybody else, and they can be prosecuted for it. That's what I'd like him to say. I can't tell you how likely that is. I truly, I just don't know. Forgive me for a moment. I have to set this up a little bit differently. I do apologize. That. And there's that. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. Pinkerbell, I wonder how much primetime coverage has been cameras on empty podiums since 2015. Yeah, really. I mean, that's not unusual for, like, local news. That kind of is, though. Even local news generally finds ways around it. It's just I actually think it's a good thing, believe it or not. The sign of the times, it's a sign of the fact that we haven't yet adjusted to the nation's interests. But the reason that there's cameras on an empty podium is this is how interested the nation suddenly became in politics. It's sad that it had to happen via a threat, like existential threat to our existence. That's unfortunate. But I prefer the news media and TV production staffs not yet quite having it down what to do with a presidential press conference than simply, replaying yesterday's golf to sell some ad space. Tom Trask, I wasn't trying to bust your chops, by the way. I see your point on looking forward. I just think I don't want us to ignore the fact that we have a president who was given an insane amount of power. He was given immunity from prosecution, essentially, and he has demonstrated his value to us by choosing not to abuse that fact. And if you're talking about making a case for Joe Biden to friends or family that are on the fence, be like, well, this guy hasn't abused an insane amount of power. And truly, there's no one else you can say on the planet. There's no one else you can say that for sure about, because he's the only person who's had the opportunity to use it. Del Sol Verde, stick around for more Blazer banter. Look, I got Blazer banter for days. I also have, you know what? I'm going to keep it to myself. I do a members only stream from time to time. Yesterday, I did one showing off the new effect before the group show. We might be having another members only stream in a little bit, showing a new thing that I've been working on. I think Foxy recently gave me some great advice, and I saw it when you wrote me live. I didn't see it in Discord, but you said virtually the same thing during a live show, and I agreed with it then. I agree with it now. Gotta step that game up. It's just how you grow. So the game is stepping up. Don't worry. If you're worried, whatever will happen to my weird channel? Oh, it'll stay weird. It'll stay bizarre. And focused on progressive politics. The Anti-Corporatist, good to see you, my friend. Environmental Coffee House, good to see you as well. Why don't I see everybody's messages? Because I have the wrong chat up, that's why. The Anti-Corporatist says he's only saying that because he thinks Biden can't win. Ooh. Oh, Cenk Uygur. Okay, so Environmental Coffee House, that's our good friend Sandy from Environmental Coffee House. Cenk Uygur says he's considering supporting RFK Jr. Oh, my God. And says that no other host on the left has been as fair to RFK Jr. as he has. Now, he hadn't been fair to him. He's been sympathetic to him. He's given him favor. That's not fair. You're not being fair to a basketball player if when you are going to throw the tip-off ball in the air, you just pass it to him. That's not fair. That's just cheating for them. Oh. And then AC saying he's only saying that because he thinks Biden can't win. Maybe. But I think I'm with Emperor Xenu on this one. I'm a huge not fan of your religion. Oh, you know what? I guess you'd be the opposite of Scientology. Anyway, Biden has a higher chance to win than RFK no matter what. Yeah. Biden could slip into a coma tomorrow. And I want to be clear that I'm not joking when I say this. He could slip into a coma tomorrow. And so long as the doctor said he was likely to recover within a few months, he would still be, not a few weeks, months, he would still beat RFK Jr. at the polls. Literally, Biden's unconscious body would beat RFK Jr. RFK Jr. has no chance at all. Anti-corporatist. I mean, Biden has now put us in a pickle. Aside from Bernie, I can't think of anyone else who would be a shoo-in as a Democratic candidate. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I can't see how it's anybody but Harris. I think we could have been dealt a worse hand, certainly. But you know, if there's somebody that tickles your fancy, it's irrelevant, I think. Harris, it's worth noting, Harris is essentially just Joe Biden. She's like, in terms of if you were to print out what she has said she stands for, what she's all about on a sheet of paper. And then her stats. How good is she at public speaking? Is she? She's, how charismatic off the cuff, how likable. She's basically neck and neck with Biden, except for the fact that she has that experience as a prosecutor, and she can argue very well in a public forum. But so my point is, we got dealt a fine hand, pocket nines. But we won't be excited about it, no matter what happens. And as of pre-press conference, I can't say with any certainty that Biden's going to step down. We'll say this. Interesting piece of news from the rumor mill. Apparently, there was some internal White House polling that got leaked, and things aren't leaked by accident, generally. There was some internal polling that the White House was doing to see what America would think of a Kamala Harris presidency. You don't do that unless you're considering it, unless you're thinking about it. That said, I can't stress enough. Don't freak out. Literally, no matter what happens in this press conference, don't freak out. I say again, people's passion about this is a great sign. It's a fantastic sign. It means people are actually taking Donald Trump seriously. I know 2016 feels like a lifetime ago. In some ways, it was. But at the time, people in the what I would call the comfy Democrat class did not worry about Donald Trump. They would talk about, oh, I don't like him. Oh, he'll run things poorly. But you could just see with how they were talking. And by the way, 2020 as well. You could just see with how they were talking, how they were going about their business, that they weren't afraid, like the rest of us have to be. Now they are. Now they're not messing around. They're playing the man's song. Maybe they're just warming up. I thought that was going to be Hail to the Chief in a moment. Mercy me. I just realized I set up this camera wrong. I should have done the green screen. It doesn't matter. This feels like the suite that would play in like a 60s movie when they had those extra long openings. Try to give the projectionist time or something, I don't know. Or like they'd just try to get done with the credits in the beginning, and it would just go on and on and on. That's exactly what this feels like. Pinkerbell, music from a 30s movie score, yes. Pinkerbell, one thing holding Kamala back is being shackled to Joe Biden and this current administration. I can see the case for passing it to her or rallying a contested convention, both. Yeah. Wicked Foxy Dragon, that jacket goes perfect with the music, Jake. Thank you. Kristen Rose, hello. Good to see you, my friend. Tom Trask, Jack in the Champagne Lounge with the Wicked Band. Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. We do have to have well, the Wicked Band is Donald James X when he's feeling charitable. That's the Wicked Band at the moment. So he doesn't really get, you know, I am going to add. Ooh. Damn it. WFAA is who is carrying this for us, by the way. And they put up a hilarious poll. They said, when will President Biden officially start his press conference tonight? 6 p.m., 6:05 p.m., 6:15 p.m., or 9 p.m.? Oh, well done, you rascals. Gang, they don't really need it. They have 1.5 million subscribers, but if you want to thank WFAA, an ABC affiliate, that is who we're watching this through at the moment. I am going to turn down the big band just a skosh. Wicked Foxy Dragon, shoot me. Tinkerbell, it's the overture. Okay, fair enough. Emperor Xenu, I feel like I should be watching an old cartoon. Is this the music they are actually playing on TV? Yeah. Environmental Coffee House. Gosh, this music is pretty. Why does it keep getting louder? It should be but a whisper now. All right, it's gonna get louder for a second. Now I have to hear it. I'm sorry. Very lightly in the background. All right, we're going to go back to talking strategy. So, recent things that happened. Thing number one, there was a leak from the White House saying that they were seeing about Kamala Harris. Okay, neat. Thing number two, articles of impeachment filed by progressive Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez against Clarence Thomas and I believe Justice Alito. Good. Show folks what the value of having a progressive in office is. Actually getting things done. Look at that. I'll be watching the... Kristen Rose says, gotta run. I'll watch this later because I know Jake is bringing it real. Well, he tries. And yes, thank you, Kristen Rose. And good luck at your meeting. I don't know why you need luck. Enjoy your meeting. My understanding is they can be fun, too. Stephen O'Rourke. Democrats with power have had 4 years to contemplate replacing Biden and are only stirred into action after a bad debate performance on a struggling news network. That's the real problem. Well, first of all, I don't see the relevance of how the network is doing. Are we just insulting things to double down on our point? How does that better stress what you're saying? It doesn't. That's Trump talk. Knock that off. But you bring up a good point, which is that they had 4 years to replace him, and they didn't take it. Instead, as a matter of fact, what they did was dump money into making sure there was as few progressives as possible winning races. That's what the Democratic establishment did. It's a fair criticism. I would say this, though. They appear to have been caught flat-footed. This isn't much of a excuse, because they shouldn't have been able Let me put it like this. They shouldn't have been flat-footed. They should have been aware of how Biden was doing, but they weren't, it seems. They seemed genuinely shocked by the fact that he shit the bed so badly. So I'm mildly sympathetic to that. But that's about it. That's all I can offer in terms of sympathy. What should have happened? What should have happened is we should be living in an ideal planet where Joe Biden was a different human being, and he put pressure on using the bully pulpit on the Justice Department to actually get Trump's case going sooner than they did. He should have fired Merrick Garland at the end of year 1, after we had gone a full year after a coup, and the culprit was not yet caught. The organizers were not yet caught. That is when Merrick Garland should have been fired. But he didn't. Democrats should have been pressuring him the whole time, because he barely won against Trump after COVID. A million billion things should have been done, but they weren't. So we deal with what we are given now. Now, Biden is not doing well. Let's just be real. He's down in the polls. If you go by the polls, and he goes against Trump right now, he loses. But remember, America has a short memory.
Thank you. Please be seated.
So he's got time to.
Well, good evening. We just concluded this year's NATO summit, and the consensus among the members was it was a great success. It was especially momentous because it represented the 75th year of the most important military defense alliance in the world's history of the world. We should never forget that NATO grew out of the wreckage of World War II, the most destructive war in history. The idea was to create an alliance of free and democratic nations that would commit themselves to a compact of collective defense. Standing together, they knew we'd all be safer. An attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. And it's worked, because a would-be aggressor knows if they attack one of us, they'll be attacked by all of us. Sending that message is the best way to deter aggression and prevent wars in the first place. For those who thought NATO's time had passed, they got a rude awakening when Putin invaded Ukraine. Some of the oldest and deepest fears in Europe roared back to life.
I was one of them.
Because once again, a murderous madman was on the march. But this time, no one cowered in appeasement, especially the United States. We collected intelligence that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine months before the invasion.
It's true. He deserves credit for that.
I directed the intelligence community to be a significant amount of intelligence to be declassified,
Palestine,
so I could start building an international coalition to oppose the invasion. Then in February, some of you remember, I warned the world that the invasion was imminent. I rallied a coalition of 50 nations from Europe to Asia to help Ukraine defend itself. Many foreign policy experts thought, as Putin amassed Russian forces just 100 miles north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, but Putin thought it was the mother home of Russia, the capital would fall in less than a week. But the Ukrainian people, backed by a coalition to help build, stopped them. Today, Kyiv still stands, and NATO stands stronger than it has ever been. During the week of this summit, several heads of states made it a point in their statements to thank the United States and to thank me personally for all that NATO has achieved. NATO is not only stronger, NATO is bigger, because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance, and it makes a gigantic difference. Excuse me. Meanwhile,
where they are
my predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said. But I made it clear, a strong NATO is essential to American security. And I believe the obligation of Article 5 is sacred. And I would remind all Americans, Article 5 is invoked only once in NATO's long history, and that was to defend America after 9/11. I made it clear that I will not bow down to Putin. I will not walk away from Ukraine. I will keep NATO strong. That's exactly what we did, and exactly what we'll continue to do.
That's what I want to hear.
Now,
when we're talking
future
about
American policy is up to the American
love
people.
To hear is that he's no longer.
This is much more than the political question.
Israel.
It's more than that. It's a national security issue. Don't reduce this to the usual testament that people talk about, issues of being a political campaign. It's far too important. It's about the world we live in for decades to come. Every American must ask herself or himself, is the world safer with NATO? Are you safer? Is your family safer? I believe the American people know. The answer to all those questions is yes. And I believe the American people understand that America is stronger because of our alliances. I believe the American consensus from Truman to Reagan to me still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world. We are an indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright wrote. Now let me turn to three other key issues. Just this morning, we had a great economic report showing inflation is down. Overall prices fell last month. Core inflation is the lowest it's been in 3 years. Prices are falling for cars, appliances, and airfares. Grocery prices have fallen since the start of the year. We're going to keep working to take down corporate greed to bring those prices down further. Meanwhile, Trump's calling for a 10% tariff on everything Americans buy, including food from overseas, vegetables, and other necessities. And economists tell us that would cost the average American working family another $2,500 a year. It's a tax of $2,500 a year. Second, our efforts to secure the border, the southern border, is working. After Trump killed the bipartisan effort to secure the border, Republicans and Democrats had worked on, because he thought it would benefit me and make him a loser, Republicans walked away. So I took executive action last month. As a consequence, working with Mexico, border encounters have gone down over 50%. The current level is lower today than when Trump left office. Third, for months, the United States has been working to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, to bring the hostages home, to create a path for peace and stability in the Middle East. 6 weeks ago, I laid out a detailed plan in writing. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7. That framework is now agreed on by both Israel and Hamas. So I sent my team to the region to hammer out the details. These are difficult, complex issues. There's still gaps to close, but we're making progress. The trend is positive, and I'm determined to get this deal done and bring an end to this war, which should end now. Let me conclude where I began.
I'm glad
we're
he's
the
saying
United
that.
States of America.
But
we are.
He's been saying progress.
Nation.
Progress. Well,
our
baby's
leadership
died,
matters.
so
our partnerships matter.
Not a point against.
This
but
moment
he doesn't
matters.
get credit for it.
We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here. Reuters, Jeff Mason.
Go Jeff Mason.
Mr. President, your political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called on you to step aside.
I'm just not interested in these questions. If he's not making an announcement, then you have his answer already.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Thank you. My question for you is, how are you incorporating these developments into your decision to stay? And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look,
Irrelevant.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one.
That's not.
The fact is that
speech.
the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
There you go.
Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now, later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. And because, look, I got more work to do. We've got more work to finish. There's so much, we've made so much progress. Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to trade places with our economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million jobs. I mean, so things are moving. We got more to go. Working class people still need help. Corporate greed is still at large. Their prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down. And so I'm optimistic about where things are going.
I think
Daddy Kemp, AFP.
And a silly question. I mean, you're not going to badger him into changing policy on the spot.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And if he
I wanted
didn't
to ask
announce it,
you
then
about your
you
you
had
mixed
your
up
answer.
Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today. And you now have sort of your key allies, including
it's
the British
just like
Prime Minister, the President of France,
It's a cheap
and the
date.
German
Try to get
Chancellor
him
having to step
Ask
in
him
and
a
make
serious
excuses for
question
you on
about
that. And officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing in my leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys, the idea anybody suggests that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference. How many times did you hear in that conference, I know it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden, because Biden did the following.
Boom.
Look, folks, this is well, anyway.
No, don't do that.
I thought it was the most successful conference I've attended in a long time. And find me
nobody told him that that is not an effective rhetorical technique anymore.
Next one. Sorry, Nancy
It might
Cordes.
just be because of his speech.
CBS.
It might just be like, I don't. have
Thank
to
you,
do this
Mr.
right now.
President.
Go
You
through all
mentioned
this stuff
there are
and moving on.
instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge. But what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your
Everybody
friends,
is
supporters,
seriously
people
gonna
who
do
think
this?
you've done a great job over
Right,
the
so
past
here's
4
my
years.
my
Have you
annoyance.
spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy?
As a
which
member
you've
of the
worked
press,
decades
you're there to
build,
get new
if you stay
information,
in the race,
not to create a story.
despite the concerns that voters say
So
they have.
everybody's
and you
just
lose to
asking him
someone who
questions
you
about
yourself have argued is
something
unfit to return
like
to
a
the Oval
decision you
Office.
can infer from the press conference. He's not going to
I'm not
announce.
in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I
Not
started.
going to announce that he's dropping out.
As you
Not
recall,
at this press
understandably,
conference, anyway.
many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward Can't do that. It's going to cause inflation. Things are going to skyrocket. The debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists? 16 economic Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job. That under my plans so far and what's going to happen in the future if I'm reelected, that things are going to get much better. Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected to stop the trickle-down economic theory, that if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well. My dad was a well-read, decent guy. I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table. Middle-class people and working-class people need help. And so what happened is I decided to was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator. And that is that the way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. That way, we grow the economy. And the wealthy still do very well. They do fine. And guess what? Find me an economist, a mainstream economist, who said we haven't done well. What have we not done that isn't working right now? And so we got more to do, though. We got to finish the job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world. Delaware has more corporations.
One thing that's nice about having an older president, shorter press conferences. I don't like the multi-hour press conferences. I don't think it's usually necessary to say all that much. From this, we've learned basically what's not happening. What's not happening, he's not dropping out. At least he's not doing it now. What is likely to happen? He's likely to look at the reaction to this, make his decision based off that in polling. Yes, I wish we had stronger candidates. I wish we had candidates that we actually cared about. But I'll say this.
Guess what?
Biden versus Obama
when unions do better,
and the Americas that came with them.
Everybody does better.
Hold on, he's whispering.
We talk about how, for example,
Biden versus Obama, and he's talking about how everybody's doing better in his economy. Good, let him have that for a moment. Biden versus Obama and the Americas that came with them. I pick Biden and this America over Obama and his America, by which I mean nobody understood anything about how U.S. politics worked in Obama's time. Basically, it was just Sam Cedar and Janine Garofalo. That was it. Arguably Robert Reich as well. People voted Obama, a neoliberal, into office thinking he was a progressive because we looked at politics basically like Republicans. Like, oh yeah, black guy. That's as far left as you can go, a Democrat who's black. I would prefer we had a candidate we cared about, but I think we are going to be voting based on strategy, political strategy for movements. Like, for example, the unions movement. That's a healthier America in my eyes, and we will eventually get the candidate we deserve. In the meantime, Biden's fine. He'll do. And he seems to think he is all right as well. So,
Vice President
all right.
Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate on that? What is it
Course
about
she will.
her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning, I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her.
Good answer. Sharp answer.
Felicia Schwartz, Financial Times.
Thank you, Mr. President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for
Everybody
that next year,
has the
in
same
2 years,
questions.
in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
All right, I hope he says Kamala Harris is there if I fail.
The limits I've acknowledged I have.
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and you're evening around 8.
That's not true. Look, what I said was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight,
Bad
it'd
reporting.
be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting a fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you look at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full
Hold your
bore.
horses, Hoss. It wasn't a
I've done,
stupid
where's,
mistake.
and where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf
disastrous
cart,
debate
filling out his
performance.
scorecard before he hits
Okay.
the ball? I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing. And I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events.
And he's going to go on explaining, yada, yada. Good for him. He's right to be dismissive of these questions simply because these are, at the moment, nonsensical questions. You can be forgiven maybe one, but once somebody's asked that, dude, if he was going to say, I'm going to step down, he would have said it. He's not going to say it. So don't waste your opportunity to question a U.S. president with a redundant question. That has no answer that will satisfy you. All right, thing number 2, I'm glad he's picking on Trump here, but I really wish he would be frank about Project 2025, about Trump being a criminal, convicted criminal. I wish he would fight mean, not dirty, not unfair, just ruthless.
Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions for you. First,
you
on the
dare,
NATO
Zeke.
summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that, in his public remarks afterwards, saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people
Followed by a bad
that you are up to the task and that there won't be more
not as
bad
bad.
nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
Lean into
First
it.
thing
Say there will be. Deal with it.
Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We've allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near or abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, and the weaponry we're getting to him? I've gotten him more long-range capacity, as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief,
I think this is wrapping up. We're going to
Chief
read
of Staff of
comments
the
in a
military,
moment. I'll give
as well as
some thoughts
the
about
Secretary of
this on the
Defense
other side
and
as
our
well.
intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis
I
on
do
what
wanna
they
hear
should and shouldn't go,
what he has
how
to
far
say
they should go in. That's a
regarding
logical thing
weapons
to
to
do.
Ukraine.
Second question related to
I guess we did already.
Bad nights, sir. How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage
Lean
or it's a
into it.
matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's got more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? Created 2,000 jobs just last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None. Who I got here? Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
elections in the US have consequences around the world.
True.
You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States. But there is a concern. Many people in Poland and across Europe are worried that the former president may win the election. And there's a lot of concern that Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push Ukraine to give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible US disengagement?
Well, look, I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving?
Sounds self-serving.
I'm not had any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. It'd be a disaster. It'd be a disaster. I mean, I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine, that that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, et cetera. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine. I said, you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. That's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? In my office. I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes. I beg your pardon? And so Finland joined NATO. 800-mile border is a significant. And they were already allies, but they weren't part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe, I can't recall whether he said it publicly in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind it being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together, to dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling to some
So
folks.
he's extolling the
particularly,
virtues of
Turkey and
expanding
other
NATO.
places
Good.
agree
I
to
think
the
that's
expansion.
good, especially given who he's
the
talking
expansion.
to, a foreign reporter
We're a hell of a
here.
lot stronger because of it.
But
more secure because
he's
of it.
supposed to be
And
making.
by the way,
Not
I was
supposed.
able to get
He
50
should be
other
making
nations. 50
the case
to
for
support
him
Ukraine.
to the American people in everything
able
he
to bring
says and
about
does
coalition
from
between
here until
of Europe
November
and
5th.
Asia, Japan and South Korea.
So
I
it
just
should
met with-
always,
we talked
always
about
be.
AUKUS, and we talked
Here's
about
why I'm
the
good.
relationship between
Quickly,
Australia,
not these long
New
rambling
Zealand,
things that I can do a whole
Japan,
segment talking over,
South Korea,
because
United
people have long
States.
since stopped loaning him
Making
the
the world
patience
safer
to
and
listen
stronger.
to his whole rant.
because we have to deal with the new
And
arrangement that
thing number
exists in the
B,
world.
this is why Trump's bad.
Cold War is over.
and
post-war
it should
era is
be
over.
lickety
What is
split.
going to replace it?
I supported our allies.
And I
I
respectfully
expanded NATO,
suggest
or
I
I
have a
was
pretty good idea
instrumental
what that
in
should
NATO's
be.
expansion,
I've convinced a lot of people
which
to follow it.
has limited
It's gonna be
Russia's
stronger.
ability to become the next
Um,
Germany circa
David
1930.
Sanger.
Trump instigated this war and got impeached
Thank you, Mr.
over
Be nice, David.
over
Mr. President,
attempting to extort
The NATO declaration
president
that
of Ukraine.
was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place in the past 2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time ago. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi, that a few years from now you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one?
Well, the first part of the question is, we discussed and I raised in the NATO summit,
compare
others raised,
yourself to Trump
the
here,
future
sir.
of China's involvement.
Will I
what
be
they're
able to
going to do,
negotiate with
What they're
Putin?
doing
Yeah,
with Russia
and against him.
in terms of accommodating,
And Trump has
facilitating.
only shown that he's
they're
able
getting
to
access to
appease
additional-
Putin.
They're not
He's
supplying-
only able to
they're not
beg
supplying weapons
very
themselves.
efficiently.
They're supplying mechanisms for them to be
That's
able
who
to
Trump
get
is.
weapons. And China's position is basically, and I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader has, over 90 hours since being vice president all the way through, for real. And by the way, I handed all my notes. But my point is that
That was a dig against Trump,
Xi
who
believes
destroyed
that
records of his meetings
China
with foreign leaders.
is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we cannot, you have to make clear, China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically as a consequence of that by getting the kind of investment they're looking for. And so, for example, we're in a situation where, and we've reestablished direct contact with China after that, remember the balloon, quote unquote, going down, and all of a sudden things came to an end? Well, we set up a new mechanism. There's a direct line between Xi and me, and our military has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that Xi understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both the Pacific Basin as well as Europe, and as relates to
Okay, so
Russia
if you're a
dealing with
progressive and you're
Ukraine.
hearing all this
so
China hawkery and it's
we-
getting you
for
nervous,
example,
understand this is for a specific audience.
want to
This is
invest
for
in
the
China, as
political
you know,
ruling
you know this
class
area really well.
and their
Trying to invest in
cousins on
China, You
TV
have to have a 51% Chinese
who
owner. You have to make sure that you do by the
have a
rules.
knowledge of foreign
And you
policy
can't- you
that
don't have the
goes no
authority,
farther
you have
than
to
China
provide
bad.
all access to all the data and information you have.
And even then, they
There's a
only
while there, if you recall,
behave
last
that way
administration
because in their
and other administrations, where
terrible,
access to that market was enticed
terrible
enough
life
for companies to
experience,
come in.
having a
Because
foreign
they have
enemy is how you
access to
is how you
over a billion
unite
people in a
Americans.
a
How you
market.
rally Americans. You
Not
pick a
really
foreigner
a lot of people
and you
in the
say,
market.
"Let's get them."
And So they were doing it.
So that's what he's doing here.
That got
It's the
curtailed.
agreed upon
we
enemy.
started
It's
saying
the
we
ideal
play by the
enemy
same
that
rules.
every successful
example,
president tries to
The
have.
idea they don't abide
The
by
ideal
the
enemy
international
is
rules
one
related
who
to
is dangerous
subsidizing
but
products
inactive.
by the government funding. So guess what?
They're outside the gates. They're deadly, but they're outside the gates, and we're going to keep those gates strong,
Others are
those
doing the same
walls
thing around the
thick.
world. But it is a concern.
Doesn't
It's a
matter,
concern.
really doesn't matter if
China,
they are actually an enemy or not.
North Korea, Russia.
That's who we are at the moment. That's why
necessarily
the conversation has drifted over into frankly nonsense about China. Not nonsense. You can't. We can't also pretend like China is not another right-wing country. It is. It means it has to be watched, just like everybody else. But they have about as much interest in an actual conflict with us as we have in an actual conflict with them, which is to say none.
Are going
We're
to be
each other's best
curtailing
customers.
their investment in Russia. In China, as long as China continues to have this indirect help to Russia in terms of being able to help their economy as well as help them in as a consequence of that their ability to fight in Ukraine. The other thing that we talked a lot about is that, and I raised it, and I didn't hear any. I can't swear that everyone agreed because not everyone got to talk about it, but we need a new industrial policy in the West. For example,
All right.
we talked about how both the EU as well as NATO has to be able to begin to build their own munition capacity, has to be able to generate their own capacity to provide for weapons and the ability to. It came as a surprise to some of us how we had fallen behind in the West in terms of the ability to construct new material, new weaponry, new everything from vehicles to weapon systems. And so one of the things that came out of this was we're going to be meeting again with a number of my colleagues, my European colleagues, is what do we do to increase the capacity of the West, particularly in Europe and Japan, to be able to generate the kind of ability to produce their own weapon systems. Not just for themselves, but to be able to generate that.
Well, that's outside my expertise. My initial instinct as a insufferable lefty is that I don't like any time we're arming other countries that aren't currently being attacked. And I don't like expanding the military-industrial complex to other countries. Having said that, there's something to be said for deterrence. I just don't know.
I'm dealing with Xi right now and direct contact with him. I have no good reason to talk to Putin right now. There's not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior. But there isn't any world leader I'm not prepared to deal with. But I understand the generic point is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior. And the idea, look, Putin's got a problem.
This is good.
First of all, in this war that he is supposedly have won, and by the way, I think, don't hold me to the exact number, but I think Russia had 17.3% of Ukraine that they've conquered. Now it's 17.4. I mean, in terms of percentage of territory. They've not been very successful. They've caused horrible damage, loss of life, but they've also lost over 350,000 troops, military, killed or wounded. They have over 1 million people particularly young people with technical capability,
And he's not
leaving
wrong, but
Russia
that is how
because they
Russia
see no
fights
future
wars.
there. They've
To
got a
meet China.
problem. But what they do have control of is they are very good at controlling and running
know
the
anything
public
about
outcry
war strategy. I
that
just
relates
know
to how they
political
use
strategy as it
mechanisms
relates
to
to war.
communicate with people. They
They'll
lie
accept
like
a lot of
hell
death.
to the constituencies. They lie like hell about what's going on. And so the idea that we're going to be able to fundamentally change Russia in the near term is not likely. But one thing for certain, if we allow Russia to succeed in Ukraine, they're not stopping in Ukraine. I recommend, I know you know this because you've written about it, read Putin's speech after they moved in, what it was all about in Kyiv. It wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is. And anyway, but so I think that I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants to talk, including if Putin called me and wanted to talk.
Good. One thing I did want to say about the China hawkery, I don't want to exaggerate that either. It is good to be hesitant to play too nice with China because China, by virtue of being one of the major players on the world stage, one of the big three, and really just the big two now, they're going to do evil things just like we are. And when they do, we should have plan in place, an idea of how we're going to handle it. I like that he wants to handle it over the phone at negotiations and not by putting holes in Chinese ships.
14 leaders of the Pacific Island nations. And we've slowed.
But so far, about 20% of this entire press conference has been talking about how we're going to deal with China. There's my perspective. I don't think anything in particular that he said is wrong. I just think he's comfortable talking about that, and they'll bite on that, so that's what they're talking
Khalid
about.
with NPR. I have two questions. Earlier, you
Don't
spoke about the
disappoint
ceasefire plan between Israel and Hamas. We're now looking at 10 months of war, and I'm curious
good
if there's
job.
anything that you feel personally you wish
Thank you,
would
NPR.
have done
Find that.
differently over the course of the war. And then secondly, if I may, I wanted to ask you about your presidential campaign. I remember covering your campaign in 2020, and there was a
You were
moment where
Sandy, I
you
rolled.
referred to yourself as a, quote, bridge candidacy, a transition to a younger generation of leaders. I want to understand what changed.
On the record.
Two things. Let's go back to when you talked about would I have changed anything that's happening with Israel and the Palestinians and the Palestinian movement.
Just say the good old
The
man's
answer
got
is,
to
as
beat
you
the bad
recall,
old man.
from the very beginning,
all
I
you can
immediately went to Israel, but I also got immediate contact with al-Sisi in Egypt. I met with the King of Jordan. I met with most of the Arab leaders to try to get a consensus going as to what had to be done to deal with getting more aid and food and medicine into the Gaza Strip. And we pushed it really hard. And Israel occasionally was less than cooperative, number one. The Israeli War Cabinet, I've been dealing with Israel since Golda Meir. Some of the reporters around here cover me all the time have heard me say this. The first time I met with Golda Meir, I sat across from her at her desk, and her assistant was Rabin sitting next to me. That's how far back I go. I know Israel well, and I support Israel. But this war cabinet is one of the most conservative war cabinets in the history of Israel. And there's no ultimate answer other than a two-state solution here. And so what was able to be done in terms of the plan I put together was it would be a process for a two-state solution. And we get the Arab nations to, particularly from Egypt all the way to Saudi Arabia, to be in a position where they would cooperate in the transition so that they could keep the peace in Gaza without Israeli forces staying in Gaza. The question has been from the beginning, what's the day after in Gaza? And the day after in Gaza has to be, the end of the day after has to be no occupation by Israel in the Gaza Strip, as well as the ability for us to access, get in and out as rapidly as you can, all that's needed there. I've been disappointed that some of the things that I've put forward have not succeeded as well, like the port reattached from Cyprus. I was hopeful that would be more successful. But that's why when I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas, the one thing I said to the
So
Israelis, and I met with the war
the
cabinet,
disappointment with Biden
make the
regarding
same mistake America
Israel-Palestine
made
has
after Bin
been
Laden.
that,
There's no need
much
to
like
occupy
China is
anywhere.
with Russia,
Go after the people who did the job.
we're saying
You
on
may
the world
recall I
stage,
still get criticized for it, but
oh, it's a
I
shame.
was totally
Oh, what
opposed
they're
to the
doing, we don't
occupation
support
and trying
Israel.
to unite Afghanistan. Once
We
got-
would choose
once
to
we
go
got
about this
Bin
differently.
Laden,
We don't think this
we
is
should have
necessary.
moved on.
And at the
Because
same
it
time,
was
we're
not
giving them
gonna-
weapons
no
to
one's
do
ever
it.
gonna unite that
Now, if
country.
you want to be
Been
realistic, we
over
could
every
cease
inch of
sending them
every
weapons
inch, the
right now,
entirety from the poppy fields
and
all
their
the way to the
ability to
north.
carry out this
So
massacre
don't
would
make
not
the
be
same
much
mistake we
hindered.
made. Don't
But
think that's
symbolic
what you should be doing,
gestures
is doubling
matter.
down. We'll
How
help
about
you
this?
find the bad
Cease
guys.
all trade with
Sinwar
Israel.
Company. And
Cease
and
all
was
weapons
critical
shipments
about I
to
wouldn't
to
provide
Israel.
when the weapons they needed.
Everything
I'm not providing them
to
2,000
Israel.
pound bombs.
Knock it off
They
until
cannot be used
they
in
stop the
Gaza or any
genocide. It's
populated
pretty
area without
straightforward.
causing great human tragedy and damage.
Doesn't mean Hamas
But
leadership
remember
gets
what happened when-
gets away with it
when
either.
you had the attack on
Arrest
Israel
those motherfuckers
with
because they did
rockets
slaughter civilians.
and ballistic missiles.
They should be in front of
I was
a
able to
criminal court,
unite the Arab nations
an
as
international
well
criminal court.
as
But
well as Europe.
as of this
Nothing
point,
happened.
so
Nothing
should
got hurt.
Netanyahu
Set-
and his
set an
entire
incredible
administration.
lesson
They
for
are
what was going on from the Middle
the
East.
same,
So
as
there's a
bad
lot
or
of
worse
things
than
in
Hamas. Possibly
retrospect
worse because
wish
when
I
their
had been
own
able to
people,
convince the Israelis to do.
when their own
Bottom
people
line
were
is we have a
victimized,
chance
they
now.
used it as an
It's time to
excuse
end this
for
war.
what appears to be a real
Doesn't mean
estate
walk
scheme.
away from going after Sinwar and Hamas.
So
And if you notice,
when he's
you know
going
what
on
we
and on
noticed?
about like, well, I've been
There is
talking
a
to these folks.
growing dissatisfaction
He's been talking to
in-
them for
on the West Bank
since
from the
October 7th of
Palestinians
last
about
year.
Hamas.
I've been
Hamas
talking
is
for a
not
real
popular.
long time.
And so there's a lot of moving parts.
Too many
We just
babies
have
are
to
dead.
keep moving to make sure
Too
that
many
we get as
teachers,
much
too many
done as we
nurses, too
can
many innocents
toward
are
a
dead
ceasefire.
to have any
A
patience
ceasefire.
for talk
Like
about
this.
talk.
And by the way, look at the
Action.
numbers
Action's what we want to hear about.
in Israel. I mean, my
That
numbers
said,
are
don't
better
get
in
it
Israel
twisted.
than they are here.
There is not an
And again,
option
better
on the
than a lot of
table
other
right
countries
now
too. But anyway,
who has said on the record, I mean for president, who's said on the record that they will
Candidacy
be
in
better than
2020, You
Biden.
referred to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
what changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited in terms of the economy, our
response.
foreign policy, and domestic division.
Now
And
good again.
I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth. Most presidential historians
Talk
give me
about Trump.
credit
2025.
for having accomplished more than most any
Fascist.
president since
Be frank.
Johnson and maybe before that.
Don't be coy.
Get major piece
Be
of
frank.
legislation passed. And what I realized was my long time in the Senate had equipped me to have the wisdom to know how to deal with the Congress, to get things done. We got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it, to get that finished. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and I hadn't inherited what I did and we just moved things along, anyway, it's going to
that's annoying.
change.
Last question.
Be anyways.
Haley Bull, Scripps. Or no, Josh Weingrove, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he needs to be more blunt about the
Thank you,
threat
Mr.
of Trump.
President.
That's all I'm
Many
saying.
of your colleagues, Democrats on the Hill, are watching tonight as they assess what they want to say about your candidacy. I'm wondering how you're thinking of
Waste
this
of
right
a
now. It
question.
seems like your answer is clear, but they're watching how things go tonight, tomorrow in Michigan, next week in Texas and Nevada. Are you thinking that way? about whether how the next week or two goes would inform your
Am I using that way you said?
Are you thinking that way about how the next 2 weeks go? Will that affect your decision?
He's gonna,
or are you fully determined on running in November as the party's nominee?
I'm determined on running, but I think it's important that I allay fears by let them see me out there. Let me see them out. You know, for the longest time it was,
To be
you know, Biden's not
Last
prepared
question.
to sit with us
I'll see you on
unscripted.
the other side.
Biden's not prepared to,
We'll read
anyway.
comments.
And so what I'm doing is
But,
what I've been doing. I think we've done over 20 major events, from Wisconsin to North Carolina to anyway, to demonstrate.
I think
that
he's doing it just
I'm
to piss
going
me
out
off
in
now.
the areas where we think we can win, where we can persuade people to move our way, or people are already there. And then look, the other thing is, we have the most extensive campaign organization of anybody's had in a long, long time. We have well over 1,000 volunteers knocking on doors, making phone calls, making tens of thousands of phone calls. We have headquarters. I forget exactly how many. I don't want to cite a number and then find out I'm off. But we have scores of headquarters in all the toss-up states. We're organized. We're moving. And that's awful hard to replace in the near term. And so, and here's the other thing. I was in the Senate a long time. Very proud of what I've done in the Senate. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee for a long time, and I was chairman or ranking member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library. Anyway, I'm going to be going around making the case of the things that I think we have to finish and how we can't afford to lose what we've done or backslide on civil rights, civil liberties, women's rights. There's that little button we have. Control guns, not girls. I mean, the idea, we're sitting around, this is where Kamala's so good as well. We're sitting around. More children are killed by a bullet than any other cause of death. The United States of America. What the hell are we doing?
Dark
What are we
Brandon,
doing?
Welcome back.
Got a candidate saying, promise the NRA, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything.
This is what
I'm
we
not
need.
going to do anything.
Anger,
You got a
emotion,
Supreme Court that is what
outrage
you might call the
at the
most conservative
conditions
court
we
in
have
American
to live
history.
in. Good. Go, Joe. Go.
This is ridiculous. There's so much we can do still. And I'm determined to get it done. It's about freedom. And by the way, I'll end this. Well, I'm not going to do that. Haley has to come up too. But
What?
I remember I made a speech on democracy
Haley.
in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. And
God, I
I'm not
hope
being
there's
critical,
a
just observing.
assistant named Haley
The bulk
there.
of the press, what the hell is he talking about that for? Democracy. You did. Democracy is not an issue. Democracy is not an issue.
Yes, it is.
Except the polling data showed 60% of the people knew I was right, thought I was right.
Thank you.
I'm not asking you a question. You don't have to answer, obviously. But do you think our democracy is under siege?
Yes.
Based on this court? Do you think democracy is under
Yes.
siege based on
Okay,
Project
good.
2025?
Thought he was going the other way
Do you
for a
think
second.
he means
You're
what he
like, "It's
says when he
fine."
says he's going to do away with the civil service?
He's bringing up
Eliminate the
2025.
Department of
Good.
Education? Make sure, I mean, we've never been here before. And that's the other reason why I didn't, you say, hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job. I've got to finish this job because there's so much at stake.
Good.
We've had some discussions
Good
over the
pitch.
past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams. And you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job.
Oh my
Are
God.
you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
Well, look, two things.
Press is of our
One,
generation is
I've
a
taken
massive discipline.
3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff and I said, I'm going to go to South Korea, we're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand. You know, the only thing age does is help you with it, creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's important that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out, hadn't hidden a thing. You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out. And every single day I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now. And I'll ask you another question. No matter what I did, no one's going to be satisfied. Did you have 7 docs? Did you have 2? Who'd you have? Did you do this? How many times did you? So
Good.
I
I'm
am
glad
not
he's
opposed if my doctors tell
frank
me
about
I should have another neurological exam. I'll do it. that's where I am.
ridiculousness of a lot of these questions.
Haley Bull, Scripps.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis when it comes to support for Ukraine. Does that mean you have not closed the door on further considering lifting restrictions for U.S.-made weapons inside Russia? And if I may, your convention is coming up where your delegates are pledged to make you the official nominee. If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I get overwhelming support. Overwhelming support. I won, I forget how many votes
That's
I
a
won in the
stretch,
primary. Overwhelming.
Fair enough.
And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says, we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
Even if that means vote for someone else?
Sure. Look, I'll end this with this. I served in the Senate a long time. I understand the impetus of candidates running for local office and whether they think the topic can help them or not. In my state of Delaware, which was a very, at least it was a red state when I started, in terms of where you now talk red and blue. I don't recall most of the Democratic presidents winning my state when I was a candidate. The truth of the matter is I understand the self-interest of a candidate. If they think that, running with Biden at the top is going to hurt them, then they're going to run away. I get it. But so far, go and look at the polling data in their states. Look at the in-depth, and by the way, I think you all acknowledge, and you're all experts. I'm not being solicitous about the president. You're experts on this stuff. How accurate does anybody think the polls are these days? I can give you a series of polls where you have likely
Pretty
voters,
accurate, though.
me versus Trump, where I win all the time. When the unlikely voters vote, he wins sometimes. The bottom line is all the polling data right now, which I think is premature because the campaign really hasn't even started. I mean, it hadn't started in earnest yet.
It
Most of the
sure
time,
has.
it doesn't start till after September, after Labor Day. So a lot can happen. But I think I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern. And I think I'm the best qualified to win. But there are other people who could beat Trump too. But it's awful start from scratch. And, we talk about, money raised. We're not doing bad. We got about $220 million in the bank. We're doing well. So with that, you have want to follow up on any of that? You just
By the
asked
way,
me.
if you'd like to give me money,
Um,
go ahead.
You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that.
Stop whispering.
Thank you.
This ends tonight's
It was effective once.
Thanks, everybody. This concludes.
Respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age.
Children.
How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
You could just walk away.
Listen to him.
Give him the dirt.
This concludes tonight's press conference. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
Not bad. Not bad. Okay, so what were we looking for? I'm going to read comments in a moment. I'm going to start, well, it's nice and fresh in the old THC repository. I'm going to give my thoughts on the press conference. You know, it was enthralling to see in those moments leading up to it. Is he going to come out, rattle off a few accomplishments, and then say, I've done some soul searching, drop the hammer? And he didn't. So he's done some soul searching, and as of this moment right now, he's still in it. It needs to be it needs to be crystal clear for everybody watching this. It's his choice. I don't mean that as like the way it ought to be. I don't mean that as like, let's be kind to anybody. He holds all the cards here. He's the presumptive nominee on account of voting. So if he says, I'm still running, and you happen to be in the press pool, you have an opportunity to ask the president a question, don't ask a question he's already answered. By not announcing that he isn't running, he announced that he's still in this thing. Now, he didn't do that for no reason. He's not a dummy. He knew he was going to be bombarded by the questions he was bombarded by. And he knew what this press conference was all about. This press conference was all about demonstrating to the American people that he has his wits about him. And I think he did it. He did just fine. As for his individual answers, you know, I was talking about it during the press conference, but, you know, it's centrist neoliberal stuff. I tend not to be as critical of Biden on that front because we knew what he was. I think we should pressure him, try to change him. I think in his second term, it'll be easier for him to be swayed because he's going to care more about his... I mean, it's all... Every politician just assume it's greed-based. He's going to be more concerned with his legacy than with funding another campaign. He's done with campaigns after this one. Forever. So all of those bridges that are made of money, he's going to be fine burning. I was super disappointed in the press for not being serious, I guess. For the same reason, there we go, camera's fixed. For the same reason, I don't think it's a big deal if Biden gets replaced on the ticket. I also don't think you should waste your time trying to get him to say something that'll be embarrassing, that you can loop on 10 different newscasts. I don't think you should. When he did that slip up where he said Vice President Trump, we do that all the time. You're talking about Trump, and you're talking about your vice president, or you're talking about a different person in relation to yada yada. Yeah, it's people. I mean, that's just like a regular thing. It was fine. In other words, the whole press conference, it was just fine. I was excited to hear that it went. I was happy to hear, I guess, that things are going well with NATO, that he's keeping those alliances strong. I'm glad to hear he hasn't forgotten about Ukraine. Thank God. I was at least pleased to hear that he understands that the killing needs to stop in Palestine as well. I do want to be clear, though. The neoliberal way, the centrist conservative way of handling this is no longer acceptable. In the 21st century, we can't go on as though foreigners aren't human beings anymore. That's been the standard way to handle things in the United States for my entire lifetime, as far as I can tell, for the entirety of its existence. Just pretend like foreigner is a breed of slaughterhouse animal. And whether or not they live or die is based entirely on what you're in the mood for. That's how we treat people from other countries. In America, that's how we think about them. It's not acceptable. So, that hurt will have to be addressed. We can never again have a president that would behave even as badly as Biden. But let's not kid ourselves. Donald Trump's knocking at the door. You're talking about who would be worse, an abusive father or a serial killer? Let's not pretend like the abusive father is a good person, but they're not a serial killer. I mean, it's not even close. So, looks like Biden's sticking in the race. Okay. Based on how this went, based on how the pressure is going from the Democratic establishment, he yet may drop out. Awful late in the game for that, but nothing's like it used to be. And if we're honest, if something happens 2 weeks before the election, it'll be old news 1 week before the election. That is the modern world. So, I think we're okay. Whether it's Biden or not, I think we're okay. And it looks like, at least for tonight, it's going to be Biden. Let's read from the community some reactions here. The anti-corporatist, I hope Biden can pull it out, but I'm making alternate plans in case he can't. Yeah, by the way, Environmental Coffee House did a great video on how to prepare for living in a fascist hellhole. If Biden loses, or let me try this again. If the Democrats lose in November, I would just say have Sandy's video memorized by then. Have a bug out bag. Consider having a firearm. Have plans for becoming scarce quickly. Because that is how, without exaggeration, that's how bad we're talking here. Project 2025, it's the playbook for turning America into a tiny mustache, empty high five land. Democrats got to win. Good news is, it does appear that most people are aware of that. Rex Trek, I'm tired of feeling on edge. I'm sleeping too much. Look, you just watched a press conference from the president. You're doing what you got to do. You're staying informed. The other thing you can do is post a link to a quick explainer of Project 2025 on your social media. Just what it is, who's associated, a little infographic. You know what? I will try to make those available to you guys. I'll try to put those on the community tab here. Just things you can download and share around social media so that you can make other people aware of things. Bad news is you usually have people's attention in regards to politics for about 30 seconds. The good news is you only need to come up with 30 seconds of material. If you are working under those constraints, so are the bad guys. So we just need a better pitch for the situation we've got. We've got 30 seconds of somebody's attention. I will provide you with 30 seconds of why you should vote for whoever the Democrat is. To tell you how serious it is, if it was a Republican going up against Trump, if that's what we had, literally a GOP Republican versus MAGA Donald Trump. So like Liz Cheney, an actual villain, Liz Cheney. Through her sister is gay. Liz Cheney voted to not allow gay marriage in the United States. Liz Cheney. I'd vote for her. I'd campaign for her. That's how serious it is. I mean, at this point, it's not even a political ideology in terms of right or left versus another political ideology in terms of right or left. It is genuinely democracy versus dictatorship. And the major groundwork has already been established. Supreme Court decision is in. That's the really, really bad news. The really, really good news is most people seem to be aware of this. Our job is just to fill in those that aren't. I will say, I don't like the polling. Polling is rough. It should not be this close. We got to find out how we contact those people. Elaine, hello. Good to see you, my friend. Let me scroll down a little bit. Wicked Foxy Dragon. Thank you, stater of the obvious. Oh, never mind. Pinkerbell, I want to see Trump versus Liz Cheney in a presidential race on a TV show, not in real life. Yeah, fair enough. I would watch that, especially since nobody can slam a Republican like a Republican. Wireless Mike, they need to stop twisting the knife. Yeah, absolutely. It's not even that I feel bad for Biden or that I even particularly think it's going to hurt Biden's chances all that much, because every time somebody says, Biden, can you do it? It's in the context of, can you beat Trump? And that is in the context of, can you beat Trump? Because if you can't, America is effed. So all of this, like, I know people are addressing it. Hold on, this button is just killing me. I know people are addressing it as though it's like terrible for Biden. It is, but it's worse for Trump. It is significantly worse for Trump. Because all of this is just advertisement for how horrible it would be if Trump got elected again. Just keep reminding folks of that, and you'll feel a lot better. It happens to be true. Elaine, good to see you, my friend. The anti-corporatists, they need to get Kamala out there so that when Joe chokes on a corn dog on Halloween, the rest of us don't end up hanging. I think I gotta be clear. I don't know this. I don't have a professional insight into this beyond my profession for the last decade requiring that I watch a lot of politicians talking. So I tell you this hunch simply as a hunch from your old pal Jake. I don't think it's an accident that we haven't seen much of Kamala Harris lately. And if that's true, then I think it was also not an accident that we didn't see much of Kamala Harris for the last 4 years. I even criticized her for that. I was like, where are you? What are you doing? Do you know what I think she's been doing for the last 4 years? Do you know what I think she's doing right this very moment? Avoiding scandal. She knows she's not charming. She's the lady with that weird coconut line. Did you think you just fell out of a coconut tree or whatever? She knows she's not charming. She knows people don't see her and go, Kamala. She's not Obama. She's not Clinton. She's not Cortez. She's not Tlaib. And she is smart enough to know this. All she can do is hurt herself by being present and being seen unnecessarily. What will happen if and when she becomes president? It'll probably be under pretty grim circumstances. It'll probably be because either Biden passed away or he had a medical event that means he can no longer do the job, or some major scandal takes him down, or he buckles under the pressure because the polls are all mounting against him and blah, 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 blah. She will have the momentum of sympathy on her side. But if she's already well known as the doofus who did this gaffe or that gaffe, it's going to erode public opinion in those crucial first moments before she even has a chance to speak. So, if what I think is true turns out to be true, then that will mean she's going to stay quiet. She's going to stay in the back pocket. She's going to prepare very well for the vice presidential debate, if there even is one. Trump may order that there be none. But she's going to prepare very well for it and probably annihilate her opponent because she will make it about policy, and her opponent will have the disadvantage of having to defend Republican policy sets, which everybody hates. So there's my thoughts on Kamala. I think she's lying low, and wisely so. Wireless Mike, Kamala is fine. She stayed out of the news and did her job. What you can do, you're right. She's keeping her head down, and that's what a VP is supposed to do. Yeah, I mean, generally, yeah. They're also often, though, almost a secondary press secretary, and she hadn't been doing much of that. But I think it's because they're trying to keep her clean as they possibly can, because there is a very real chance she'll have to take over. And if that happens, they want people on her side. It's a great way to message that, Tom. Let's see what it says. Pinkerbell, let's see what Tom says. Tom Trask, another bug I'd like Biden to put in the press corps' ears. Why do I always say corps? In the press corps' ears. They need to ask Trump just exactly how his policy differs from Project 2025, because other than some minor differences on abortion, he's on board. Yeah. I would love for him to do that. I think that's a great suggestion. Bear in mind, the real value of that isn't even for getting the press to do it. It's for the American people hearing Biden tell them the truth about 2025. It's for getting the American people to be like, wait, why hasn't the press told us about this? What? Wait, what is this Project 2025 thing? Holy dude. That's what we need. I think you're right. I think that would be savvy of Biden to do. I've noticed that he has specifically not talked much about Project 2025 or the Supreme Court. He's mentioned it, so he's not hiding from it, but he hasn't talked much about it. And it infuriates me because that seems to me like the old-fashioned playbook of like, well, people like it when we're above that sort of stuff. No, you silly bastards. People hate you. Hate you. Democrats, human beings, despise you, and they're right to. Because you're terrible people who live in a fantasy land. The only people that like you are the people you chat with at expensive golf clubs. Golf courses? Whatever. At expensive golf facilities. And you think you're talking to regular folks when you deign to lower yourself to playing at a sporting event where you don't necessarily have to be in the political class. You can just buy your way in. You can be a mere owner of several car dealerships and play there. And so you lower yourself to talking to those peasants who only own several car dealerships, and you get their opinion. I'm sure they like it when you don't talk about that stuff. Because they don't live in the real world. But those of us that do, we're somewhat concerned about the fascism. So talk about it more. And get the press, as Tom Trask says, get the press to ask about it. And a question like that, how specifically, Donald Trump, does your policy platform differ from Project 2025? You said you don't stand behind it. And a long time ago now, over a week ago, you said you hadn't seen it, even though it's something that your top advisors put together and apparently forgot to tell you about. So, now that you've had a chance to look at it, how does your policy platform differ? And incidentally, if you chose not to look at it, why are you choosing to remain ignorant of this thing that your top advisors made? Great question. Great point, Tom. Thank you. Wireless Mike, he's never heard of it? Doesn't know anything about it, but he disagrees with some of it. Yeah. Wicked Foxy Dragon, don't think they like him either. Yeah, I don't think... Look, if you're a Republican, only billionaires like you. And if you're a Democrat, no one likes you. Most of all your constituents. But that's kind of how it should be. I love my representatives, but the party they're in, I don't. And if, like, my representative is Rashida Tlaib, but I bust her chops publicly in front of a camera all the time. That is one good thing about America, which yet remains. We're allowed to, we're encouraged to, and I think we should. They are genuinely our servants. And if you ever feel bad about ordering around your servants, understand that they are compensated well. They are there to do your will, and they should act like it. All right, gang. Oh, Patrick Thibodeau. Never going to skip one from you, my friend. He said he didn't know what it was, but he didn't agree with it. How is that possible? That is possible only if you're Donald Trump. And your brain is full of cheeseburgers and naked pictures of your own daughter. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake. We have, before we go, I have a couple of fun things coming up. I want to do another diversity squad, but I want to open it up. I want to invite other content creators on for that. I think it would be fun. So, if you're in our Discord, do let me know, content creators, you think I should invite. Odds are they'll say no. This is a nightmare show for a content creator to do, which is why I love it. So odds are they'll say no, but if you send me somebody you think would be good on it, if someone with hopefully a sense of humor and a good heart, send it to me in the Discord or at whycdnetwork.com, and I'll send the invite. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake. And this is Donald James X.